And welcome back, everybody. This is Rusty here with the Rugby Review. And with the completion of the Six Nations Rugby Tournament, we get back into domestic professional leagues. And so we're back with the URC. And this week, we're going to be recapping round 13. And so here was round 13's game schedule. Last Friday, March 20th, 3 games were played. Bulls versus Cardiff, Scarlets versus Zebre, and last but not least on Friday was Ulster versus Connacht. The following day, Saturday, March 21st, 4 games were played. Lions versus Edinburgh, Sharks versus Munster, Benetton versus Ospreys, and Glasgow versus Leinster. And the last game of the week was played Sunday, March 22nd, and that was Stormers versus Dragons. So here we have the results of all 8 games. And let's just jump right in here. So game 1, Bulls versus Cardiff. This was one of 3 dominant performances by the South African teams this week. Bulls won this game by a score of 40-7. Very dominant game by the Bulls here. And let's just take a quick peek at the stat sheet here. This was a very strong bonus point victory by the Bulls. Bulls ended up scoring 6 tries during the course of this game to just 1 for Cardiff. And just to emphasize how dominant the Bulls were during the course of this game and just how easily they were opening up Cardiff's defense, the Bulls had 714 meters gained during the course of this game to 330 for Cardiff. An absolute massive difference there, and just showcasing the offensive domination that the Bulls had during the course of this game. So, very strong win for the Bulls here. Helps keep them in the top 8 hunt, and then Cardiff will look to regain momentum and bounce back come round 14. Now, game 2 of this week was Scarlets versus Zebre, where Scarlets won by a score of 36-17. And if we look at stat sheet here, this was a good bonus point victory for the Scarlets. Scarlets ended up scoring 6 tries during the course of this game, and I will say the Scarlets probably were able to take advantage of a little bit of ill discipline for Zebre Parma and a few handling errors. By and large, the stat sheet here will be fairly similar between both teams, but when you get down to turnovers lost, penalties conceded, all of those numbers are very much in favor towards the Scarlets. Parma having 10 turnovers lost, 10 handling errors, in addition to 13 penalties conceded. Gave Scarlets a couple extra opportunities, and the Scarlets were able to execute on those opportunities, so maybe this will be a good thing for the Scarlets to get some more momentum rolling forward, maybe make a push for the top 8. We'll see. And then after a very hot start to the season, unfortunately Parma's been kind of down in the dumps for quite some rounds here, so maybe Zebre Parma will try to end the season on a high note, get some positive momentum going into next year. Now, game 3 of the weekend was a nice Irish derby between Ulster and Connacht that saw Connacht winning by a score of 26-19. And I feel like this is like the 3rd game in a row that Connacht has won. So Connacht's really hitting a good stride right now into the back end of the season here. Bonus point win for Connacht with 4 tries. Ulster does walk away with a losing bonus point, having only lost by 7. And what you'll see with this stat sheet here is Connacht put in a huge defensive effort and was also very efficient with the ball that they had. So the number of tackles for both teams, 250 tackle attempts for Connacht during the course of this game. Ulster only had 142. Massive difference there. And then if you look at both possession plus territory, very much in favor of Ulster. However, Connacht was very efficient, with ball in hand and took their opportunities when they had them. In addition, one thing that probably did hurt Ulster a bit this week was handling errors. If you look down at turnovers lost, Ulster had 10 turnovers lost to just 4 for Connacht. So, in a close game like this, having 10 plus handling errors, it's always going to kind of bite you in the butt at some point in time, potentially. And unfortunately for Ulster, it did this week. So, again, I think this is like the third game in a row that Connacht has won. So this is really good momentum for Connacht, again, coming to the back end of the season. And they're definitely going to be making a good push for top 8. And then Ulster will look to bounce back next week and get back to winning ways. Fourth game of the weekend was the second dominant South African performance, where we saw the Lions beating Edinburgh by a score of 54-17. Now, this is one of the more unique stat lines that I've seen for quite some time, because Lions were the much stronger, much more dominant team, yet Edinburgh absolutely dominated possession and territory, and were able to put a bit of offensive pressure on the Lions, making them play a lot of defense. However, when the Lions had ball in hand, they were way better with ball in hand than Edinburgh was. So, 8 tries scored for the Lions. Again, 60+% possession and territory in favor of Edinburgh. Lions had 176 tackle attempts to just 95 for Edinburgh. Now, Edinburgh had really bad tackling this week because they missed 32 out of the 95 they attempted. Lions did not need a second invitation to start running wild with all those missed tackles, because the Lions had 646 meters gained to 333 for Edinburgh. Lions were able to get 20 clean breaks to just 5 for Edinburgh. So despite the possession plus territory advantage for Edinburgh, Lions were the much better team, much more efficient team. They just played a much better game of rugby this week than Edinburgh did. So that'll help Lions keep their top 8 position and kind of try to help them push up the ladder even further. And this is one that Edinburgh, hopefully a good film session comes from this and they can bounce back and kind of right the ship in round 14. Game 5 was the third dominant South African team performance, where Sharks played Munster, and the Sharks won by a score of 45-0. Just skunked them. So let's take a look at the stat line. Bonus point win for the Sharks, having scored 7 tries during the course of this game. It's, there's nothing really here below that would showcase a very dominant performance by the Sharks. Possession, territory, slightly skewed towards the Sharks. Almost the same number of tackles. Almost the same number of tackles missed. The only thing that would be an indication of slight offensive dominance comes here at meters gained plus clean breaks. 5 clean breaks for the Sharks to just 1 for Munster. And the Sharks had 314 meters gained to 236 for Munster. So, again, dominant performance by the Sharks here. Shut out Munster, 7 tries scored. Stat line doesn't necessarily say that, but doesn't really matter because it's all about what the score line says. So this was a really great performance by the Sharks. They'll look to obviously keep this momentum going forward. And then Munster will look to right this ship, and they'll get some extra help with their Irish internationals returning as well. Game 6 this week was Benetton versus Ospreys, where Benetton won by a score of 31-19. Now, during the course of this game, This game was very close through the first 60-odd minutes or so, 65 minutes, and then Ross Moriarty on the Ospreys happened to have gotten a red card. With the man advantage, Benetton was then able to extend the lead and get a bonus point victory here. So you can see Benetton ended up scoring 5 tries this particular game. And then as you look down the sheet, it almost looks like Ospreys were playing the better game, and then Benetton got the man advantage and was just able to pounce and take advantage of it, because you see possession, territory, they're in favor towards the Ospreys. Benetton had to rely on a bit more of a defensive effort this game. Something tells me meters gained, that really started to blow up for Benetton, especially once the red card happened. But to be fair, neither team was playing defense very well this game, because both had over 30 plus missed tackles, which is just huge. Now, it's very obvious to tell, especially with the last 2 lines on the stat sheet, that Benetton was able to close this game with a man advantage, because they were able to win this game, and they had 17 penalties conceded to just 6 for the Ospreys. So, huge difference there between the two teams. Normally you would figure if a team has 17 penalties, they would be on the losing end of this game, but when you have a man advantage, plus the Ospreys had a handful more of handling errors than Benetton did, you get the outcome that you have. So I think Benetton will be very happy with the outcome of this game, and then Ospreys might be feeling like they let one get away, so we'll see how these teams do coming into round 14. Game 7, second to last game this week, was a battle of 2 top teams here. Glasgow versus Leinster, and Glasgow got a very decisive victory here, winning by a score of 38-17. And here's the stat sheet for it. This was a very physical game between both teams. Both teams had to make a lot of tackle attempts during the course of this game, but at the same point in time, both teams were able to get a lot of running ball, a lot of breaks as well. But Glasgow ended up having the better defense during the course of this game and was probably able to take advantage of their clean break advantage. So Glasgow, again, got the bonus point victory during the course of this game. Yes, they made more tackles, or had more tackle attempts during the course of this game, but they were able to eke out the edge in meters gained. In addition, they had 13 clean breaks to just 7 for Leinster, so they're giving themselves more opportunities to make Leinster play defense on the back foot, potentially have more holes in the defensive line, and maybe get more scoring opportunities, which seems to be the case this particular game. So, a home win that almost seems a foregone conclusion for Glasgow this past week, holding their position at the top of the table, and then Leinster still in the top 4 of the URC, but definitely will look to bounce back next week and get back to winning ways. Last game of the week was a victory for the Stormers. The Stormers played the Dragons and ended up winning by a score of 29-21. So it seems like the Stormers are back to winning ways. Let's just look at the stat sheet here. So Stormers do walk away with a winning bonus point victory here. And as you look down the stat sheet here, by and large, Stormers were the much better team. Actually, I take that back. They weren't the better team, but they were the team that seemed to be playing just a little bit better than the Dragons, except for handling errors. Stormers had a lot of turnovers this week on handling errors, so the Stormers had 14 turnovers lost to just 2 for the Dragons. But outside of that, Stormers had better stats and stats that were more in their favor. So, again, scored more tries, possession and territory in favor of the Stormers. Stormers had less tackle attempts, forcing Dragons to be under pressure defensively. Stormers were able to gain a lot more meters than the Dragons were, so on and so forth. So again, Stormers back to winning ways, probably climbing up the ladder again this week. And then Dragons almost had a losing bonus point victory, but obviously they'll look to get back to winning ways like every other team that took the L this week. And one thing that I want to mention as well before we look at the live ladder is during round 5 of the Six Nations, there were 3 makeup games that were played. So March 13th, 2 games were played, and these 2 games are being made up from round 2. So the first game was Connacht versus Scarlets, where we saw Connacht won by a score of 31-14. Game 2 was Edinburgh versus Ulster, and Ulster won that game by a score of 40-19. Following day, March 14th, I think this was a makeup game from either round 8 or 9, and it's the Bulls versus the Stormers, and the Stormers won by a score of 32-19. So now all teams have been fully caught up, and all teams have played the exact same amount of games. Here we have a look at the live ladder. Just a quick reminder, all teams that are in the black ink are teams that did not change positions. Teams in the green ink are teams that have moved up the ranks this week. Teams in the red are teams that have moved down the ranks this round or this week. So Glasgow still holding that top position right now. Stormers and Ulster climbing back up. And then there was a big shift with the top 6, in which we saw Leinster, Cardiff, and Munster all drop from the results this past week. Lions, Bulls are holding the same positions, and Connacht again on their winning streak continues to climb the ranks. Ospreys dropped 1 rank from round 12 to round 13. Sharks staying in the same position. Benetton and Edinburgh flip-flopped positions. Scarlets and Dragons also flip-flop positions, and Zebra Parma still hanging out at the bottom of the ladder. Here is round 14's game schedule. So today, March 27th, we have Sharks versus Cardiff, Glasgow versus Benetton, and Leinster versus Scarlets. And tomorrow, March 28th, there'll be the other 5 remaining games, where we have the Bulls versus Munster, Connacht versus Ospreys, Lions versus Dragons, Stormers versus Edinburgh, and to finish off the week, we'll have Zebra versus Ulster. So that is it for this week. Thank you everybody for listening. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe button, and if you know anybody that might be interested in this content, please feel free to share this video with them. Have a good one, and I will see you next week for round 14.